So good afternoon to everyone, to Microsoft 365 UK user group, M365 UK. I'm Chirag Patel, and welcome to everyone for joining and giving up your time today. We have about 90 attendees registered for this event meeting today, and so it's obviously event is being recorded, and the slides and recordings will be shared later this week. But in the meantime, please post your questions and for other sessions that we have today on the top right window of the live event. So we got two exciting speakers today, Patrick Guimonet from France, and we got Garry Trinder here from UK. So in a moment, we'll just introduce Patrick, but this is the agenda for today. It's a 2-hour event, so we have a 10-minute break in between, but roughly fairly flexible with the agenda. So we have Patrick who will be talking about the SharePoint Spaces, major functionality within SharePoint, but also we will have Garry talking to us about the keyless authentication. In essence, the writing the good custom code with the authentication and not having to save credentials all over the place. So both very exciting sessions, looking forward to those. But for those of you who are new to the M365 UK, I'm Chirag Patel. techchirag.com is the best way to get in touch with me. I organize the event and also speak at a lot of community events, and somehow this year I've spoken in quite a lot of events purely because of the flexibility of online facilities. I'm also an Office Apps and Services MVP, but generally I work in the IT Pro capacity, covering all aspects of Microsoft 365, SharePoint, Microsoft Teams through various parts of the projects, covering deployments, implementations, or simply just enhancing the existing investments of the customers. So I worked with Patel Consulting, and also I try and keep up with the certifications as well, because things just change so quickly and rapidly. But yeah, I've been around for 20 odd years, and you can connect with me on Twitter, LinkedIn. techchirag is the handle for that. But in terms of, for those of you who are new to M365 UK, this is kind of, as I mentioned, the 7th edition. We've got a next month event planned as well on the 13th of January with Vassan Opanen and Tomislav. And so again, 2 great sessions there as well for Microsoft Teams. But also, meetup.com/M365 UK is the best way to stay up to date with the links to slides, shares, videos, and future events. So do take a look at that if you can and register for the next month. In the meantime, as ever, always looking for great content and speakers. Even if it's a short session, it doesn't have to be a full 45 minutes. By all means, feel free to submit your session, covering basically everything around Microsoft 365, SharePoint, Yammer, or even security and compliance topics as well. So that's the URL there, and I'll post this in the Q&A window a bit later on. But at the moment, since the 7 months, we've got about 320 members for M365 UK, and it's still growing. So really appreciate that, and thanks for your support in that as well. So with that, I'll kind of just head over to our agenda quickly now and just introduce Patrick. So Patrick and I, we've kind of known for each other for many years now, and I've spoken to many community events together with him, as well as organized by him. And he's a MVP for many years, also regional director, and is a CEO at his company Abalon in France. So with that, it's my honor to have him to speak with us and giving up his time to present a session for all of us. And so his session is about the introduction to SharePoint Spaces, and basically this is the Microsoft SharePoint's mixed reality experiences, and basically what we can do within the SharePoint. So without stealing his thunder on that, I'll just basically go over to Patrick and say, Patrick, it's over to you. Thanks.
Hello.
Hey, Patrick, you all right?
Do you hear me?
Yes, all good.
Yeah, that's a great pleasure to be there with you and with all the Microsoft 365 UK user group. So it's a great pleasure to be there. And so let's jump to the slide and to the demo. So all this session is about an introduction to SharePoint Spaces. SharePoint Spaces, in a few words, is a 3D virtual reality environment for you can embed, you can deploy in your SharePoint online environment, and that's a very cool topic. And we will see some very interesting use case.
Sorry, Patrick, do you want to share your slides if you haven't already, please?
Yeah. Sorry.
That's okay.
Do you see me?
Yes, all good. Thanks.
Yeah. So all those topics is very cool, but I want also to put some ideas on very cool use case you can find on this topic. And the main question for me is not if the topic is cool, but why we would need such a type of environment in your intranet, for example. And we will try to give some answer to this question. So a few words about me. My name is Patrick Guimonet. So Patrick is very easy for English-speaking users. Usually, people. Guimonet is very French, so you can say Patrick. That's enough. I'm coming from Paris. My job on a day-to-day basis is to be enterprise solution architect, and I help my customers to build some real business solution using the tool set we have in Office 365 and Microsoft 365. I love to be a speaker and organizer of international events, and for sure we meet with Chirag in many community event since many years now. So we have created what we call AMS community, which means Azure, Microsoft 365, and SharePoint community, which help us organize this type of events. Feel free to connect on LinkedIn, for example, or Twitter, or Facebook, or Instagram if you want to see some cool pictures. I have been awarded by Microsoft 10 times MVP, and I have also been during 4 years Microsoft Regional Director. But I would say the most important thing about me to know about me is probably that as a French guy, I love baguettes and I am a bread eater. And I love the idea that there are many types of breads around the world, and that's very typical from the humankind. I think almost every people on the planet have some type of bread to share. So that's very interesting to see this type of very common humankind habits. So. I have a typical question for my attendees. So that's not easy because we are in live event, but I love to say that IT people need to be involved in any Microsoft 365 project, but business people as well. And in fact, what I have seen from my little experience on this subject is that what makes the real difference between a successful project and a not so successful one is that to be successful on any type of project, being SharePoint or be it Teams project or being deployment of the whole suite, you definitely need to create some discussion, some interaction between the IT and the business. If you don't do that, you will be in trouble at some point. So that's usually interesting to see that we have some people coming from IT or from business in the attendance, and usually it's a mix of both. And definitely that's very important to have a successful project. So Let's jump in our topic. The agenda will be very simple, very clear agenda. First, we will start with a demo. Then I will give some more insight of what we have seen in the demo to better understand 3D, virtual reality, augmented reality, and things like that. And we will finish with which use case we can imagine for this type of feature or functionalities. Okay, so let's demo SharePoint Spaces. I'm sure this is the most interesting part and the point where you are. So to understand the demo, I start from a very typical Teams. So let's go to it. Here, you should be able to see a very common Teams we have nowadays to organize, for example, a company event, an annual company event. And we will create, for example, some channel for the keynote, some channel for several rooms. In Teams, nowadays we have the option to create event connected to a channel, so that's channel meetings, for example, here. And we can imagine some cool place to get some coffee or some information in the library and things like that. So that's really how we can organize an event in Teams nowadays, and that's very cool. But sometimes some people would like to have a more friendly or more, I would say, similar to a live event interface. And so we can imagine either a page in SharePoint, for example. So for example, here I have what I can imagine as a launch page for my annual event. So it's embedded in my Teams, but it can be directly in your browser. And that's a different view, but the exact same information. Here, for example, you have a link just to go to the keynote or to the specific room where you can meet the topic that is expected in each room. You can put some cool countdown and things like that, and more link below. So this is, I would say, the typical home page we can create with a SharePoint. But as you know, it's really a flat version of the world. So we will try to make it a more 3D version. So first thing is to go to SharePoint. So for every Teams, for example, you have a SharePoint connected to your environment. So you can try to go there. If you want to open the SharePoint that is connected to your team. Here, for example, I have my my SharePoint with the channel as a folder, and I can go back to the home page. This is the home page I use for my event. The interesting point here is that I can create a page for, in fact, my SharePoint Spaces. And the most easier way to do that is to go to the new button on the left, and then here I have the space option. So that's so easy as creating a SharePoint list or a SharePoint page. To create, you can create your SharePoint space from directly from here. So let's give it a name, M365 UK user group. You can put a description. The first choice you have after the name is to choose a structure. What is a structure? This is a 3D structure that will, I would say, populate your space. So you have the choice to choose a very big and very taking a lot of space structure, or to choose a very basic structure like a terrace. this is what I prefer. So I will choose the terrace, and I will show you different option maybe at some point. So here is what we get. So our space is created, and we can, as we see, move around, have a look below or on top if we want. We can see the sky and the beautiful sun here. But as you can see, we are in I would say a mountain and river, so very a landscape, very outside. So probably I want to change that, and we have an option on the top left to change just what they call the space design. So here we have some more options. So we can change again the structure. So for example, just to show you, I can use a geodome, which is, as I said, a more rich structure. So definitely I prefer the terrace, and then you have to choose. You can choose a very it will not hide, in fact, the picture which you will choose as a background. You have many options predefined for the background image. You can choose also as well an illustration, which is only a very colored picture, but only very not so much details. You can put just a color in background, but the best option, I would say, is to choose a custom files. So you can exactly choose what you want. To have the best result, you should probably choose a 360-degree picture or a very large picture, but that's definitely not mandatory. Here, for example, I have I think a cool one. So let's try it. Yes, it's loading, and definitely this one is very good for what I want to do. For example, it is inside a building with I would say a professional look and feel. So that's not so bad for what I want. I can keep it. You can have some more view on the height, what height do you put your picture. You can define the rotation where the view will start when you open the space. So for example, I want to be here, for example. Okay, this place is cool. Very cool option is that you can define a welcome message. You can define an audio file as a welcome message. So definitely, if you want, you can register yourself and record yourself and speak a little bit to explain what people are expected to do in this space. Or you can as well choose an ambient sound. So definitely you have some cool option, and so you have some predefined option like nature or rain ambient sound, but you can choose your own audio file. This can be not essential. This can seem not essential, but really to put some cool audio ambience in your space can add a lot of value to the customers. Exactly as in a SharePoint standard page, when you have finished your work, you can save it or you can publish it. You can save as a draft or you can publish. Let's, for example, here publish the page, and then if you publish it, you get access to the URL, for example, to share it in Teams or in email. And you can see here that this is a typical URL for a SharePoint page. So, for example, here we have the name of the site pages, and then the name of the page. So the name of the space we have given at the beginning. So that's really cool. But at this time, our space is very empty. So at some point we can think we should add some artifact in it, and to do that we should edit again, and then we have on the top left we have this blue plus sign that will help us to add some more things in our environment. So here, for example, I click and then I get access to all the available options. We can see several artifacts, and we will try to describe all of them. In fact, we can think about two types of artifacts. The first one are 3D objects, and the last one are 2D objects. So let's start with the more simple and with the 2D objects to begin. So for example, I want to have a file, an image viewer, for example. That's the most simple. Here I push my my object, and then I can choose an image. So here you can choose any image you have already loaded in your SharePoint, but you can choose some beautiful image from the stock images, or you can go to your OneDrive, your site, or upload any document from your desktop, or even a link to an image that is shared somewhere else. So if I go there, I will, for example, use this beautiful map. And here, for example, yes, it has added me the map as an image. I can definitely put it very close to me, or very or not so close. Here, for example, I can manipulate it with the mouse, and I can, if I click on the object, get some more precise tool from which I can specify at which angle the object is, the distance, and many other option like rotation, like in every in 3 directions. So here, for example, I am adding some rotation on the y-axis, and rotation on the x-axis, and rotation on the other axis. So as you can see, we can manage on the 3 direction. We can as well manipulate the object using this cool topic, this cool point. On every object, we have the option to access some more parameters. So here, for example, I have my image, so I can change the image, and this can be useful if you want to keep all the parameters and all the settings. You can use transparency. You can change the depth. So as you can see, your image is a little bit more visible on one side or the other. You can change the corner radius, which is very usual. You can define an alternate text. You can put some podium. So the podium is a cool thing if you want your object to be just, let me show you like that. Yes, if you want to put your object not in the air, but on something. So this is the idea of the podium, but I would say we don't have so much option with the podium right now. So it's a black black square, but it can be interesting to have this type of things, and we can push it a little bit. Okay. Probably what is the most interesting is that we can define some trigger. So here, by default, on an image, the trigger is inspect. So what does it mean? This is the default action when you click on the object. So if I go here, if I click on my I need to first to publish or save my space, and when it is saved and published, this is the action we get. So this is an inspect action we get if we click on the object to show it a little bit more close for us. If you do a right click, you get some more option on the bottom here, and we will see that in a few minutes. So let's go back in edit mode, and I can show you that you have more action option. So I can change the inspect. I can remove the default action, which is inspect, and I can change it to several other options. In fact, here I have 5 options. I can open a link in a new tab. I can link to another space. So the third option is very cool because it will allow you to create, I would say, a way to discover several space from going from one space to the other without going outside in the SharePoint site. So it's interesting in terms of 3D experience. You can as well play an audio file at this point. So this means that the audio file will play when you click on the object, and you can link to a standard page or a standard item. It's just a way to jump to another object, to another space in the 3D space. So this can be the default action, or this can be the more action. So let's keep inspect as the default action and add, for example, link to another space, for example, if we want that, we want to show that. So here I have a list of all my existing objects, a space, and for example, I can link to this event lobby if I want to go there. And for example, I can play an audio file. Not sure I have uploaded one already, but yes, okay, I have one, so that's cool. And I can as well add some save for later option. So if you want to, you will be able to go back at some point in the SharePoint space using the save for later tools in SharePoint. So that's basically the type of menu of option we get on almost every object with similar capabilities. So let's go back. One another option on every object, you can obviously edit the option, but you can as well copy the object. So if you click on this, you create a second exact copy of the first object. So you can create some cool view like that. And then the idea here is probably then you have 3 very similar objects. You can just change the image to make them look more like a wall or something like that. So let's see, for example, the other option we can get. We can add some people. So what does it mean? If we add an object called people, you get a visual card with information about the person. So here it's me by default, but I can choose another people, for example, Mr. Test. And you can probably define, put a wall of every people interested in specific topic or for things like that. You can put definitely some cool text like this is a map, and this will help you to put some information in your environment. Okay. You can, for example, add a video. So a video with the podium will look like very like a TV. So here, for example, I have a very cool, let's choose it, a very cool firework movie. So let's go there. So if you don't choose a podium, it's rather strange to have the object like that. So probably I would prefer to add some podium, and I want to have it more close like that. I want to add a podium, and this way it looks like a real TV, flat TV. So I can, for example, publish my space, and I can try to interact with a different object. So here, for example, I have my map again. Sorry. This is seems to be that's very unusual, but that's a demo effect, I would say. So my space have been not responding for a few seconds, so just a refresh, and that's okay. For my film, I can play it directly like that, or I can put it in the front of the user. So that's very cool to see some, for example, a movie explaining how your company is a great company and things like that. So that's basically the option we get with a 2D object. We can as well have a file viewer as well, which is exactly what we can expect. So you need to find some cool space, some cool file. I'm not sure I have one, but anyway, maybe in the library. Yes, in the library, I can find some, for example, Word document, and obviously, if you publish it, you will be able to get access to your document or to your image if you want. So let's go to the 3D parts now, because it's probably the most visually impacting object we can put in the environment. And we can start for a 365 image. So basically, the idea is to take a 360-degree image like the one we can get, for example, in the background at the opening of the space. But definitely, this is not needed. Here, for example, I can use my map, and I will show you what is happening. In fact, it's creating a globe like that, and if you click on the object, the picture, as you can see, is displayed in a 3D version. It's displaying a 3D version of your image. Exactly, it's very interesting to do that with a map, because my map was really flat at the beginning. And here I have the idea that it's designed for the Earth, exact sphere of the Earth. So that's very cool. That's like you are immersed in your picture, in fact, and you can, for example, show a description here if the name of the file. So this is basically what is the rendering of a 360 image, 360-degree image. You can define a 360-degree tour, which is, in fact, several images chained together. So, for example, I can choose one map and the other one, and a third picture, for example, this one. And in fact, so you add your three images, and then if you publish your space, and you click on the object, then you can go from one image to the other. So this is the image we have seen. And so by default, it's not chaining because, yes, you should carefully connect them and click them to allow the so let's save the draft to allow the mechanism of the tour. So let's go back to the tour. Okay, so here, yeah, in fact, here I should, I'm not sure why, but you should see an option to go to the other image, but I don't have selected it yet, but that's the way it should work. We have a very cool option with 360 video. So the idea, once again, it's to start from a 360-degree video, which is much better, and then you will see the video displayed in a sphere, like I saw. But here, let's do it again with my fireworks video. And once again, we get this type of sphere. And if I click on the sphere, we can see that we are inside a sphere with the fireworks displaying, a movie displaying everywhere around us. So you can imagine the result here is not so good because it's not a very large video, but you can imagine the result for a very good 360-degree video that could be very impressive and very interesting experience. But last but not least is probably the 3D object. So by default, you get access to a lot of artifacts, 3D artifacts. So in fact, you get access to a 3D model catalog. So the cool thing is that, so you can see that we have many options here. The cool thing is that you have a little guy running on the bottom left of some of them, and this means that the one with the guy running on the bottom it means that these are animated object. And so, for example, let's use the Earth. It will be probably the rotating Earth. And as we can see some animation on this object. So that's, for example, a little animation with the flew in the sea. Yes, we can see the moving part of the sea and things like that. So that's definitely a very cool artifact, and we get access to many objects like that. The interesting thing is that 3D object catalog is available exactly with the same object in PowerPoint, for example, or in Word or in Excel. But you can test it and you can use it very easily in PowerPoint. I love this animated 3D object, and for example, here we have the very beautiful fish. So here we have not really one object, but probably 10 or things like that, 10 fish moving around. So that makes the ambience very cool, definitely. And I want as well to show you that you can create, and I will explain that a little bit more in my slide. You can add your own artifact, and here, for example, I have have found on the internet some very cool SharePoint or Teams rotating logos. And here, for example, I am adding to my space a very interesting Teams logo rotating with with the fish. So this is definitely the type of cool things you can create in your environment. As I don't want to spend all the time on this, I just want to show you that we can go to the background space, and I want to show you that here we are on a SharePoint site, as you can see, and definitely you can go to the site contents. On your site contents, typically you will find the site pages, and this is where all your SharePoint spaces will be stored. And here, for example, I have the one SharePoint space I have just created. I can just launch another spaces by clicking on this. And here, for example, I have a typical SharePoint spaces I have spent more time to create. So here, for example, when I click on each object, I can directly join a Teams meeting. And here, for example, if you remember the Teams channel at the beginning, I have one Teams channel displayed on this. And here, for example, I have a rugby ball, or here I have a SharePoint logo. And if I click on the link, I can directly go to, for example, a Teams space where I will find the scheduled meeting. So this is a cool way to say to your end user, okay, go to this space, and then you will be able to join the meeting, for example. Or you can spend some minutes or some time in the lobby, in the 3D lobby, and then you will have time to see some cool videos and things like that before the keynote, for example, or after the keynote and before the virtual space. Here I have a very cool object, which is the bee. I will come back to that. Okay, so that's mainly what I wanted to show you in the demo. No, the last thing I can show you is to allow all of this to be available. You should verify, or you should activate that you have the correct site settings. So you can go to site settings. You have to go to manage site feature. And in fact, you have a spaces feature here that should be activated to create your mixed reality space on the site. So on the right, it should be activated. So this is what makes the magic of, what enables the magic of all of this. So let's go back to some slides. So I go very quickly to what we have seen on the demo. Space design, we have seen that. You will get that on the deck. We have seen that as well. We have populated our event, our space with 2D and 3D objects. We have seen all of them. The only thing we didn't get is probably the 3D. So we have seen that. Yes, here we don't see that, but you can see it on this screen. This is the 3D document library displayed in a typical SharePoint spaces. So you can definitely put some documents in your spaces and rotate from one to the other in this very cool display. So it can be a very useful to display some, I would say, business-oriented stuff, but you can imagine not so much business stuff with this rotating object. So we have seen the action we can get on almost every object. So basically, what you should remember is that we have two options. We have the by default on-trigger action, and there is only one action by default. This is the action you get on the left click, and you have more action which are available. So you can have up to 5 or 6. I think it's 5 because the one is taken by the on-trigger, and then you activate them with a right click on the object. Launch action. So yes, you have up to 5 action available. So that's it for the demo. Let's have a look on how we can better understand this experience we have seen. First, quickly, what is 3D? This is the Wikipedia definition. This is 3-dimensional computer graphics, are graphics that are used to, so we are creating, with this type of environment, we are creating a 3-dimensional representation. But the key point is that this 3-dimensional representation is rendered with 2D images, because your screen is a flat screen. And so this is why we need basically 3 phases. The first one is to have a 3D modeling of the object, for example, the sphere or the earth or the fish. Then you put on them some layout and some animation. We have seen that. And then you have the rendering in your space, in your 2D image. How can you experiment it? For example, if you want to play with this beautiful bee, you can do it very easily in Windows 10. So if you go to the search bar on Windows 10 PC, you will see that we have at least 3 3D app in Windows 10, the Paint 3D, the 3D Viewer, and the Print 3D. So with the 3D Viewer, you can get access to this beautiful bee. As I said, all the 3D models are also available directly in PowerPoint, for example, or in any Office apps. And for example, you can play with a very cool helicopter like that directly in your PowerPoint, in your slides. Here is some picture of the 3D Viewer app, so you can play with the rotation, with the light, with the environment and things like that. So that's very cool way to experiment your object and to play with them. What is mixed reality? So we have several acronyms here. Mixed reality is the merge of real and virtual worlds. So as it said, it's a mix of both. Definitely, virtual reality is a fully virtual space, and you should think to all of this as a continuum. In fact, you can start from the real environment and you put some artifacts, 3D artifact on it. And for example, we can speak about augmented reality. And the more you go to the virtual environment, you go to augmented virtuality, and at some point you are in a fully virtual environment. So this is really a continuum of space between the real and the virtual. One question I get usually is how to enrich my SharePoint Spaces. We have seen the default SharePoint Spaces, but one of the first things you can think about is to add, for example, some very cool 360-degree background images from real places, like a cool place in London or a cool place in Paris, if you want. Then you can follow this very cool tutorial from Mark Rackley on Google, how to use Google Maps to create some SharePoint Spaces of real place. And Mark did also another very cool tutorial on how to create 3D objects from 2D images. And for example, I have been able to create my own Microsoft 365 logo in 3D using just a regular 2D image from the logo. So that's a cool way as well to publish, to create some new artifact. So here is my logo. I am very proud of it. But definitely, it's really easy stuff to create such a thing from a picture, a simple picture. If you want to download it, you have a link on the bottom. So how to get started? You should be aware that there are many, in fact, 3D assets available on the internet. So you can use 360-degree images, 360-degree videos. These are usually the usual format we know, but you can also find some more exotic 3D models already crafted for you using the very the not so common extension, for example, GLB file or FBX file. The cool thing about SharePoint Spaces is that you don't need any specific authoring tool because everything is rendered in your browser, as you have seen. But you can always, it's not mandatory, but you can always enhance your experience by using special hardware and, for example, head-mounted display. Which will immerse you directly into the 3D space. This is also a very good resource I highly recommend. This is Introduction to 3D Content Guidelines for Microsoft, and this is some explanation about the 3D engine, because the 3D engine is the same in Office and in SharePoint Spaces. So it will give you some interesting understanding of what is behind the scene and how it is working, and some more info about some assets and some content creation, things like that. So this is a downloadable content you can get from Google, for example. If you search the name 3D Content Guidelines from Microsoft, you will find it. So to conclude on this, I would say okay, that's very cool, and usually nobody disagree with that, but for which use case? This is the great question. I would say this is up to you to find your use case. So that's just some ideas I can bring to the table, but definitely SharePoint Spaces is a web-based authoring tool that gives SharePoint customers the power to tell 3D or virtual reality stories. For some scenarios, we can imagine the typical scenario Microsoft is proposing is, for example, onboarding and campus tours. Or we can as well imagine some very cool product catalog and training. And the third scenario is probably around product launches. But definitely, as far as I'm concerned, I have been approached by some customers to create something similar to what I show you, which is more a virtual lobby for an event, or a virtual space to embed internal customers in a story to prepare them for a keynote and for several sessions and things like that. So for an annual event. So definitely you can create your own scenario once you have well understood the capabilities around the SharePoint Spaces. If you need some more help, be aware that, as usual, there are some cool and very rich information on support.microsoft.com. So you have many all the capabilities described on this page, and I have also created my own sway on the right. So I put there all the cool resources I can find on this topic. So to start or to go a little bit deeper in SharePoint Spaces. And that's it. That's the final link to all the resources. And that's it. I wanted to thank you, everybody, and have a cool Christmas and cool end of the year. I suppose it's coming very soon. So I'm not sure if we can get any question. Chirag?
Yeah, sure. Well, thanks, Patrick. That was great. Pretty is flowing there, I guess. How to present the content there.
Yeah.
But yeah, we have a question from from Joe Gasper.
Yeah.
You can probably see that as well as you share the screen. Yeah, so he's asking what methods do we have at the moment to programmatically access the SharePoint Spaces?
Yeah. That's a very good question, and as far as I know, there are no way to no API to create the space right now. So I would love to have one, but at this time I don't think it's available. So I'm pretty sure that will come sooner or later, because it's I would say it's mandatory in certain scenario. So definitely that's something we need.
Okay, no, that's good, and I think probably just give maybe a couple of minutes if anybody has any questions further to that. I mean, I had a couple of questions myself, but yeah. I think is there anything available through the use of mobile devices? Do you know? Because I haven't seen anything on the roadmap.
No, I have not seen anything. So I think it can be a little bit challenging because it probably needs some resources on your browser and on mobile. I'm not sure it's so easy, but you know, it can be available in the future probably, but not yet.
Sure. No. Okay. I just wondered in case if you had come across something.
No.
The other question I had was more around like you were showcasing some of the files and the 3D objects, and kind of floating in that space environment. But what if if you have a PowerPoint presentation and PowerPoint slides, which you got some like a morph effects going between the slides? Can something like that as a PowerPoint file be played within the SharePoint space instead of just displaying a static file?
That's a very good question. I tested it, but I'm not sure of the answer. Maybe I can go back just to show you on my screen.
Yeah, only if you got time. I mean, it's not a major, because I know, because I tried it myself. Because I can get as a static content, but I'm just wondering that. We will have a lot of users will have a lot of PowerPoint slides and a lot of transitions between slides, and
I don't think it's very optimized for SharePoint displaying at this time. Yeah, it can be improved probably. Yes.
Okay.
But because right now it's more like displaying static images. But if you want to do that, definitely I would register the PowerPoint as a MP4, for example, a movie file, and then it will display like
true. Okay, well, let's leave it at that. I think we're on the hour. It's 5 p.m. here in the UK. And so I think just looking through the questions, I think I have got one. Let's have a quick look. No, just thanks and compliments. Yeah, so no further questions there. But yeah, listen, Patrick, thanks very much for giving
you very much
and being here. And really hope we'll get the feedback to you as soon as we get that. But we'll obviously just take a kind of a quick break for now. But just wanted to welcome back everyone to M365 UK. Once again, thanks for Patrick's session earlier for those of you who joined. And we now welcome Garry Trinder, who's our next speaker for the event. So Garry's session is about keyless authentication with Azure Managed Identity, a huge topic in itself. So obviously, something that I come across in my customers' organizations where various applications or services have been written, and sometimes some of the old habits, if you like, are used to kind of store credentials in different ways. So yeah, really looking forward to this session, how to do things securely and properly. But before, for those of you who don't know Garry is from UK here, is an MVP and a great community contributor to the Microsoft PNP team, who is a member there, as well as the CLI, Microsoft 365 CLI maintainer, amongst other things that he does and speaks at various events. So I think we've known each other for a few years, but yeah, just like Garry and everybody else, plenty to learn from this fast changing landscape. So I think with that, I'll just hand over to you, Garry. Garry, welcome.
Thank you very much, Chirag. Thank you very much for the great introduction. Yeah, it's been a while since we've last met, but I think it was Prague, wasn't it? Last time we actually met, which is probably about a year ago now. So it's been a long time, but yeah, community doesn't stop, right? We're all adapting. So yeah, thank you very much for inviting me, and yeah, great session by Patrick. So hoping I can follow and keep the standard up. So yeah, let me share my screen first of all. Okay, so hopefully you should be able to see that. Okay, so yeah, welcome everyone. So my name's Garry Trinder. So I'm from the UK. I'm a solutions architect. I worked for a consultancy called CPS. I'm not a 10 times MVP. I'm just a 1 times MVP, unlike Patrick that came before. But yeah, I'm a office development MVP. I was awarded the MVP last January, so I've been an MVP about a year. In that time, I've actually joined the Microsoft 365 patterns and practices team as well. And that's generally through my work with the open source tool CLI for Microsoft 365, where I'm also a maintainer of the project, and we like to bring things forward and help developers and admins, manage the daily struggle of managing Microsoft 365 tenants and environments. So I'm really involved in the community, so you can generally find me on Twitter, but also GitHub, where I'm spending most of my time now in the maintainer world. I've got my blog. And I also have, I'm a co-host on a podcast with 2 of my colleagues, Kevin McDonnell and Alan Erdley as well. So together we are Grey Hat Beard. We're a podcast. We talk about Microsoft 365, the modern workplace, development, basically anything that we just want to have a natter about. We generally go on for a little bit long, but do check us out if you're looking for something to new to listen to. It would be great if you could subscribe and give us a listen. So for today, so basically a bit of a quick agenda really. It's the kind of what problem are we actually trying to solve here with an Azure Managed Identity. I'm going to just go through kind of how we potentially manage credentials at the moment, the benefits of using Azure Managed Identity, and then what I'd really like to do is basically show you it in action and just show you how simplified it makes connecting to different Azure resources or Azure APIs, and also show you how you can kind of leverage it with no code in Azure and actually code as well. So we'll jump into logic apps and Azure functions, and then just kind of have a bit of a summary at the end. So I guess this is just an open question, something for everyone to think about really. Managing credentials, just think about how you manage credentials in your organization at the moment. As Chirag has mentioned, the old habits, storing credentials in code. Why do we do that? Is it, it's difficult to manage those credentials, but we have to. It's something that we really need to keep on top of, with all stories about data breaches and passwords being breached, getting access to systems, information that people shouldn't be able to access. So I just want to have a think about how you do that currently. Where do you store your secrets for your Azure functions, for example? Where do you store your certificates for accessing some APIs? And I guess the next crucial bit is, once you've managed those credentials, how do you manage the expiration of that? How do you manage renewals? Do you have a process in place for you? Do you have a reminder in your calendar to make sure that you've renewed your certificates and that everything that's using that certificate is updated? And maybe you are doing those things and you're using things like Azure Key Vault to store your credentials, but you're storing credentials in Key Vault. How do you then access that Key Vault without storing any credentials? You could get into a big cycle here of having one master key to get to all of your credentials that could access all of your systems. So just kind of think about that for a second and how you'd manage that, because we know it's painful, right? Authentication is also painful. Credentials, handling them, it's a hard process that involves a lot of work. So this is where Azure Managed Identity comes in. So I've called it Azure Managed Identity because that name, I think, fits than its actual formal name of Managed Identities for Azure Resources, which was actually a rename of another name, which was called Managed Service Identity previously. I think it's easier just to call it Azure Managed Identity. But what this really allows us to do is it allows us to enable identities on Azure resources and use those identities to access any Azure AD backed service. Now, this might be an Azure resource, so it could be a virtual machine, it could be Azure Key Vault, it could also be an API, because we know that APIs are obviously are also backed by Azure AD. So we open up scenarios of authenticating to SharePoint Online, Microsoft Graph. The best thing about this is when we create our identities, we don't actually have to store any credentials. That is all taken away from us. So we don't have to manage anything. So that's one headache that's really gone. Another benefit of using Azure Managed Identity is that it automatically rolls your credentials for you. So, in a scenario where you've got a client secret maybe that you're using to connect to a service at the moment, and that has an expiry date, you've got to manage that. You've again, set a reminder, update it in all the different places where it's being used. Because we're using an identity and we're not using a credential like a secret, basically Microsoft take that pain away from you as well. They handle that in the background. What actually happens is, for our identities and the credentials that are stored way in Azure that we don't have access to, they're automatically rolled every 45 days as a security measure, which is nice to know. It's completely abstracted away from us, but it's good to know that. I think one of the biggest things, and this is such a good thing as well, is that there's no additional cost for using Azure Managed Identities. It works with Azure AD, but it's not a premium service. So it's available to you right now as part of your standard Microsoft 365 licensing in Azure. You can just use it. And another thing that it also uses is to handle its permissions. So, for example, a Logic app needing to access an Azure Key Vault, that access is controlled through role-based access control in the Azure portal. So we can basically give our identities access to the service, and we can see that like it would be any user in the organization, alongside, like, say, an administrator who would be managing that service. So it's a real simplified way of doing identity where all of the responsibility has been shifted off to Microsoft, which is, you know, in the world of cloud computing, we're all used to using serverless things and let Microsoft take the infrastructure pain away from us. Now they're doing the same for identity as well. So it's, to quote a famous line, where we're going, we don't need credentials. We do need identities, however, and it's key to know that when you create or use Azure Managed Identity, you get an option. You get an option between two types of identities. One is a system assigned managed identity, which is basically tied to the Azure resource that you want to create the identity for. So, for example, I have a Azure Logic app. I want to grant that a system assigned identity. When that is created, it means that that identity can only be used by that single Logic app. It can't be shared with any other resources. The benefit of that is the life cycle of that identity is also tied to the Azure resource. So if you delete the Azure resource, the identity is also removed from Azure AD. It cleans itself up quite nicely. However, there is a second type, which is user assigned managed identity. Now, this works in exactly the same way as the system assigned managed identity, apart from the way that it's created, it's slightly different. When you create a user assigned managed identity, it actually creates it as an Azure resource. So it sits alongside all of your resources in your resource group as an identity resource. The benefit of that is that you can then use that identity across multiple resources. So say, for example, you've got a solution and you've got, say, 5 Logic apps, and you all of these Logic apps want to, say, communicate with Microsoft Graph. You could create a user assigned managed identity and assign that identity to all of those Logic apps, and they can then use that one. So it just becomes a bit easier to manage rather than potentially cluttering up your Azure AD with system assigned managed identities. Well, that's something which I'm going to move into, because I'm going to start the demos. So in this demo, we're going to start from quite a common scenario of we're going to access Azure Key Vault. So I've got a secret stored in there, but I'm going to use Azure Logic Apps and Azure Managed Identity to authenticate to the Key Vault service and return that that secret so that I can use it. And whereas using Logic Apps, nice and visual, and also it's low code as well. So let me jump to my Azure portal. So I've already got a resource group set up. I've got a number of resources in here. I've got an Azure Key Vault. So let's just go into here. So I have a Key Vault and I have a secret. And this is the secret that we're going to obtain by managed identity. So we can go in there. We can see it's not got a great value, but it's there. It's hidden away. It's encrypted. We can't access it at the moment. If I go to my Logic app, which I've already created, I'll just show you the start. So we've got a Key Vault already, HTTP action already set up with the URL to obtain that Key Vault. Obviously, we don't have any authentication details in at the moment. If I expand this this parameter, you'll see that what we can do in Logic Apps is we can say we want to use managed identity as our authentication type. Now, I don't have any identities set up for this Logic app, therefore it's throwing me a nice error and it's complaining that I need to enable a system assigned managed identity, or maybe a user assigned managed identity, so I can select it and then use it as part of the authentication process. So I'm just going to discard that. And let's go to enabling the identity. So on the left-hand side, on the settings, there is an identity, and we get the options of what identity we want to create. So system assigned or user assigned. So what we're going to do in this scenario is we're going to turn on system assigned identity. So we're going to enable the prompt. And this has now told us that the Logic app has now registered a managed identity with Azure and has returned the object ID. Now, it doesn't really show you much, but I'll show you what that means from Azure AD perspective. Let me just duplicate the screen. Oops. Let's jump to Azure Active Directory. So when enabling that identity, if we go to Enterprise Applications, and what we can do is we can search for the name of the Logic app. Because it's created this identity, it creates it as the same name as the resource that it's tied to. So going back to that life cycle, it's easy to match up the managed identity to the resource that is using it. So if I open this, we can see that it's basically created a service principal, a specialized service principal in Azure AD that we can use. So now if I go back to my Logic app, actually, so yeah, so go back to the Logic app, we will now see in the designer that I can enable managed identity, and it's no longer complaining because it knows there's an identity there, and I can save that. Now I can run this and it'll fail because we've not granted this identity access to the key vault. So that's what we're going to do next. So go back to my key vault. So one of the benefits that we were saying is we can grant access through role-based access control. So we can go to the access control for the key vault, and we can add some role assignments. So I'm going to add a role assignment, and I'm going to give this contributor role. In fact, actually, it's a good way of looking at this is that you can see there's a whole host of different roles that we can actually give this identity access to the key vault. Contributor is obviously we could do more than just read values. We could actually change and update settings in the key vault as well. But if we really wanted to dial down the permissions, we could select a much lower scoped permission. But I'm just going to leave that as contributor for the moment. And when we come to select in the select the identity in the picker, you can see that it says user, group, or service principal. Well, we know that we've got a service principal that we've just created. So I can see I've got a number of them in here. So I'm going to select my keyless auth one, and I'm going to hit save. That's now got access. What I'm also going to do is create an access policy as well. So the access policy allows us to set the service principal in here again. So I'm going to select that, and I'm going to give it get permissions to get a secret because that's all we need. I'm going to add that. So it adds it in as an access policy, and I'm just going to save this. Okay, great. So what we've got now is we've configured the we've gone to the Logic app and we've enabled managed identity. That has created the service principal, which then we've granted access to the key vault. So what we can do is we can go back to the designer. And now we've got the get secret, what we can do is one thing we need to enter along with the defining what identity we want to use. We just need to give it an audience, and that is going to be vault.azure.net. This is just to help part of the authentication. So let's save that. And then let's run it. And there we go. It ran. It successfully got the secret. It's got the value by not passing any credentials. It's all been done in the background by Azure. So what actually has happened there? It's not immediately apparent, so I'm hopefully not going to bore everyone by showing you a nice diagram of what just happened. So this diagram, it's related more to an Azure virtual machine, but we can swap Azure virtual machine here for Logic App, Azure Function, any Azure resource that supports enabling managed identities, which is pretty much all of them at the moment. I can't think of one that doesn't, so it's well covered. So one of the things that we did, we enabled the managed identity at step 1 on the Logic App. What that did, it created a new managed identity service principal in Azure AD. And there was an update made to what's called the Azure Instance Metadata Service, which is the IMDS, which basically registers that that service principal. Now, that service principal, when it's created, it actually gets created and a certificate gets created with it as well. So it's actually using certificate authentication behind the scenes. If we look in the manifest of that service principal, if we kind of broke that open and used some code to look at it, it actually shows you the encryption, the details of the certificate, which is really cool. So once that has been enabled, everything's been set up from the Azure side. Step 4, we then obviously we've created that identity. We need to give it access to something. So using the role-based access control, we're able to grant that identity access to the key vault. And then we went into Logic Apps and we configured the HTTP action to basically use that identity and basically tell when it does the request, which audience it's for, which identity we want to use. So what actually happens then is when that Logic App is executed and that HTTP action makes its request, what it actually does first is it goes to a local endpoint that's only accessible in Azure. So in the metadata service, we've got this local address where we can get the token from. It passes the details of, I'm using this system identity, here's my audience, can you pass me back a token please? And if everything's set up correct and the permissions are all set up correctly, then that local instance is going to return that token to Logic Apps, which then Logic Apps can then in turn use that to call the API for the key vault, because it's got an access token for that key vault with all the necessary permissions. So that's how it works behind the scenes. And what's great about this is that it just takes all of that complexity away. Again, we didn't have to manage any credentials there. We could just set things up and basically run with it. And this is a really powerful way. Again, low code. We're not in Power Automate here. We're in Logic Apps, but we're able to really simplify scenarios. And from an administrative point of view, this makes it really easy for IT pros to set up identities for maybe developers to use. You don't have to give out any credentials for them to run things or deploy things to production. There's nothing to handle. It can just say, I need to use this identity, and that's it. So that kind of sets the scene really for using managed identity to connect to other Azure resources like Key Vault. However, one thing that I did mention is that not only can we access the Azure resources, we can also use this to call APIs. Now, from an automation perspective, this is really great for me. as a an architect working in Microsoft 365, I'm always working on different integrations using SharePoint Online, using Microsoft Graph, and handling the permissions to those can be a bit of a pain. So what I'm going to show you now is how we can use the same approach, but actually configure the identity to have permissions to the Microsoft Graph. So if I come back, so I've already got a logic app set up for this, so a separate one. I've not got anything in here, just part of just a recurrence. Oops. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to go to the identity. So what I'm going to do actually this time is we'll create a user assigned identity, and we'll show that. Oh, so actually no, that's adding. What we want to do is we want to create them. Managed identities. Yep. So I can create a managed identity resource. So this is like, creating a logic app. It can be in a particular region. So I go UK South, and I will call it user assigned managed identity keyless auth graph dev. So here I can name it whatever I like, can make it more descriptive, which I couldn't do when I just enabled the system assigned identity. But obviously this is now standalone. So I can create this. Okay, that's created it. Back to my resource group. And refresh. Still waiting for it to come through. Yep. Let's do the refresh. Yeah, there we go. Always refresh issues. So we can see now we've got our identity alongside all of our resources, which now allows us to select this in that user assigned identity screen. So if I go to identity, I can go to user, and I can add it in here, which is that one. I can just select it. There we go. So I've been able to select this identity, it's added it, and now this will be available in the HTTP action, similar as if I was enabling the system assigned identity. So again, what that did when I created this this identity, this resource, it also created the identity in Azure AD. So let's just move back to Azure Active Directory again. And let's see the enterprise apps. Just this one. Okay, so one of the things in here that we didn't look at before is obviously we created a system assigned identity, but we're just using role-based access control to grant that identity access to the key vault. For this scenario, it's slightly different because we need to grant essentially a role to an API. So if we come to the permissions section, now if you've dealt with app registrations in the past, this screen should be kind of fairly familiar to you. You've got tabs for admin consent, user consent, and it will show you the permissions that that registration has the access to use. So in here it's very similar. However, in the portal, it's completely grayed out. I can't actually grant access through the Azure portal to, say, the Microsoft Graph or to SharePoint. So thankfully, there's a way around this. So one way is you could use the Azure CLI, write a script and basically update the roles on this identity. Because it can be quite painful, we at the CLI for Microsoft 365 implemented a single command that allows you to do this quite simply. So if I go to my terminal, so I'm using the CLI for Microsoft 365. I've already got this installed on my machine. If you have no idea what the CLI for Microsoft 365 is, if you go to the PNP website, so this is the top level for patterns and practices. If you scroll down, we are under tools. And basically the CLI for Microsoft 365 is a cross-platform tool that enables you to manage your Microsoft 365 tenant and SharePoint framework projects as well. So it doesn't matter whether you're on Linux or whether you're on Windows or Mac OS. It's node based, so as long as you've got Node installed, you can use it. What this allows you to do is allows you to make updates to Azure AD, other services like SharePoint, Microsoft Teams, even Outlook, lots of different services. So I can show you that by just running M365. We've got a whole host of different commands in here, like I'm saying, graph commands, OneDrive, To-Do, Yammer. So if you're looking for any automation kind of tools that maybe not covering those different services in one, then CLI for Microsoft 365 is for you. But to get back on track, let's look at the command that we need. So we have the Azure Active Directory group, and what we want to do is we want to add an app role assignment. So I'm just going to open up the help. So by opening up the help, gives us an idea as to what we can expect. So we can give it a display name of an app registration or service principal, the name of the resource, and the name of the scope that we want to add to that principal. And obviously there's a remark there of what we're actually trying to achieve now, that you're able to assign permissions to system or user assigned managed identities. So the example that we're going to use is very similar to this one here, where we're basically using the Microsoft Graph and we're adding a scope. So if we add a display name, and let's quickly go back and copy the name before I get it wrong, and paste that in there. The resource that we want is Microsoft Graph, and the scope that we want is, let's do groups read write all. This is there we go, that worked. So that's returned us kind of a success that the app role assignment's been created on that service principal, and that was the resource that we used. So if I go back to the portal now and I hit refresh, we can now see that we have the permission. So we can see all the information in there that's been granted. An administrator actually granted this consent as well. So there is one thing to point out in this, because this is actually making a change to an Active Directory object. The permissions that you need are really high for this. So I've checked and done many tests. The only account that can actually perform this action is a global admin. So it's not like you could really have developers going in and adding these level of permissions in their dev environments, of course, and that's where they should be doing it. But in production, it's definitely the global admins that will need to do this. And I don't see that as a bad thing, to be honest. I think you can add some really powerful permissions to these service principals, especially this principle. This app role assignment, because it's an application only, an app only based permission. So we're not running in the context of a user here. So let's go back to our resource group. Okay. So we've got our identity, we've granted it access. We're going to go back to our logic app and we're going to edit this. We're going to add a new HTTP action. Let's do a, nope, we don't want to put request, we want to get request. And we are going to call Microsoft Graph. I'm going to get all of the groups back. So JSON, and we'll configure our authentication. Come to managed identity. We can now choose the user assigned managed identity this time, and then grant it. Add in the audience, which is graph.microsoft.com. There we go. So I'm going to hit save, and let's run this. There we go. So it's completed again, and it has returned all of the groups that are in my dev tenant. Again, without having to pass any credentials. This is now configured. I can use it to, run other requests. Azure is handling all the permissions nicely for me. Obviously, now I've used a user-assigned managed identity. If I want to create another logic app and reuse it to do something else, I can just use that same identity, and there's less setup to be involved. So, there is a decision to be made whether you use system-assigned or user-assigned. So try and plan ahead of whether you're going to reuse it or not. Whether you do need a dedicated identity. So we've just covered how you can use managed identity for calling an API. Now, the very last demo that I'm going to show is something that I've really already set up, and I can show you the code. So this is using this from a code perspective. So this is going to be showing you how to use it in a .NET Core Azure function. How to get a token for the graph, exactly the same example of what I've shown before of getting the groups. So jump back to the portal and let's look at our Azure function. So I've already published this Azure function, and it's already got an identity configured, so I've already turned that on as a system assigned identity. This identity has already been given access to Microsoft Graph in the same way as the previous example, so I'm not going to cover that again. So essentially everything is set up. So what does it look like from the code side? So here we have our logic app. No, not logic app, Azure function. So it's a very simple function, and it basically is going to go through the same process as the logic app. So one of the things that we need to do here is, one thing that the logic app nicely is doing for us is that it doesn't ask us to create another action to go and get the token. It just does it in the background. Because we're writing code, we've got to handle that ourselves, but it's not difficult to do. Microsoft have made this nice and easy. So I've got this this line here to return an access token. So I've just got another class that has a method on there to return an access token where all the work is done, and that is in this auth class here. So in this auth class, we're basically setting a connection string and passing this into a method that's or instantiating a new class Azure Service Token Provider, which is given to us from this Microsoft.Azure Services.app authentication package, which is available on NuGet. So you can basically download that and install it into your function, and the methods they provide basically abstract away the calls that you need to make to that local endpoint in Azure to obtain the token. So there's slight subtleties and nuances between the local endpoint for an Azure function and a Logic app and an Azure VM. They're not all the same. So this token provider basically handles that. We pass it a connection string just to say we're running as an app, we're running as managed identity. So what that does is it returns us a provider, which then we can call the get access token method on there, passing in the audience that we want to get that token from. So what again that is doing in the background when this is running in Azure, it's going to make that call to the local endpoint. It's going to return an access token that we then can use to call a graph. So I've set up a quick HTTP client and set the bearer header, the authentication header with a bearer token. And this is the token that's returned from the local endpoint, and then simply doing a quick call to the group's endpoint and then returning the values. So if we jump back to the portal, we can see if I go to functions and go to group, I've already got this set up. So you can see it's already there. You can't see the code because it's C#, so it's all compiled. You know, I can call this and basically get a response. So I'm going to do that locally rather from the Azure portal. So I've already got the web request set up here, and that's going to run. And there we are. We've got our response. We've got the content back. So when I hit that endpoint, the Azure function went and got a token from Azure without passing those credentials, and then passed me back the response. And we can see that in more graphically in Application Insights. So I've got Application Insights set up, and I can look at our application map, and it nicely depicts what's actually happened. So you can see that there was actually a call to this local endpoint, which is the call that was made to get the token. That then was received. Then my call to the graph actually went out there as well. So you can see again, there's nothing that needed to be passed. Everything is abstracted away nicely for us. Nice, dead simple, and easy to manage. So, bit of a summary. So we've seen that there's no need to really store your credentials to authenticate to different systems. If you do need to authenticate, say, a third-party system, a non-Microsoft, non-Azure AD service, then storing credentials, keys, certificates in Azure Key Vault, but using managed identity to obtain those details is another really secure way of managing those. But for all the let's say Microsoft services, we can hand the credential management off to Azure. It's one less thing that we need to worry about. And what's best is we can do that with actually not incurring any cost either. Certainly for me, working with integrations in Microsoft 365, this has absolutely simplified the app only scenarios for me. It becomes a much easier way of working. There is that initial setup, but once it's there and up and running, everything's a breeze. I've had things running for ages that I don't even have to think about anymore. I just know that they're going to work because Microsoft is just rolling those credentials in the background. So seeing that you can use the CLI for Microsoft 365 to update those app role assignments as well. So we couldn't do this through the Azure portal because it was all kind of grayed out, but we've simplified that adding of the Microsoft Graph roles and the SharePoint roles. If you wanted to use SharePoint APIs, we've got that down into a nice single command. The caveat of also you need it to be a global admin to actually do that as well. So it needs a privileged account to be able to create those role assignments. And one thing to note as well is that I've shown these demos and I've just given one app role assignment to the identity. The first time that is used, it locks down the permissions. So if you, for whatever reason, at a later date want to add another permission to that identity, you're going to have to remove and re-add that identity. So that is something to bear in mind. So plan ahead as well. If you're doing it in dev, it's much easier because you can just delete things. But when you're kind of thinking about production, that's one thing that you need to keep in mind. That might be just swapping out those identities as part of your releases. So something to think of. And we've also seen for the code side, if we want to use Azure Functions in C# and .NET, we've got the Microsoft Azure Services App Authentication package that we can use to simplify the authentication journey from the code perspective as well. So everything that you've seen, I guess it's all on GitHub. So I've got a repository. It's got loads of examples. Some of them they're a little bit older from a few months ago, but they're still valid. So if you're interested, pop along to the repository, take a look at the ARM templates that I've got set up, and it's so easy that you can just go into the portal and create it anyway. But it'll give you an idea of scripts and things and the process to run through. And I just want to leave you with this really is think of your next project. The next thing you're going to do where someone goes, oh, can you get data from the graph, or I want to update or provision something in Microsoft 365. Think about how you're working at the moment and how you could really benefit from using Azure Managed Identity, using logic apps to really simplify low code kind of integrations as well. Think of that I hope to hopefully see more people using this approach. So I absolutely love it. And finally, I just want to say thank you very much for listening. If you want to get in touch with me, I'm on Twitter, on GitHub. I've got the same handle on both. So if you've got any questions, please do reach out, and I'd be happy to answer them.
Great, thanks, Garry. That was awesome.
Cool. Hope you liked it. Any questions? I couldn't see the chat. So
yeah, I'm just going to look through. I'll probably give a couple of minutes. I think nothing at the moment. So yeah, we'll give a couple of minutes or so. But yeah, no, great session. I think it's a huge topic. I think in its own right, as I mentioned earlier, right at the beginning. And I think when I look at various scenarios around where you have, say, the business users working with Power Automate and developing their workflows and all those cool things, which is great. But I normally find that I think from a governance perspective, is there something within this Azure environment where you can actually force the users to just use managed identities and therefore avoiding for the users to enter those credentials in any ways, like even using the client secret and all those things? Is there any possibility there?
To be honest, I'm not sure. It'd be great if you could. I mean, there's lots of policies that you can apply in Azure, to stop people from doing certain things or, locking things down. So I think that would be, a possibility, I guess, from, the things that I showed with the logic apps. It's so flexible. You can do lots of different things. You've got all different types of, authentication methods that you can use on those HTTP connectors. So I'm not sure it's a case of, always use these types. It's, maybe having governance in place, definitely, for thinking about, how credentials are managed on a wider point. Because once you start using Key Vault, you naturally end up into managed identity. I feel so. Key Vault is the first place to basically get everything together, get it into one place, get it locked down and governed from that perspective. And then you've done half the work then for securing all of your different credentials and keys and certificates. Managed identity just becomes part of that. And if you're not using it and you're, again, going to the graph and using client IDs and secrets, when actually you could just be using a managed identity, I'm all for making my life easier.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We got to keep it simple, and I think it's as more and more applications and the usage of all these services that gets used, it's like with everything else, it's a matter of time, or the time has just gone that things should be done properly. But no, I think it is good. I think certainly it looks a lot easier from an IT pro perspective to as you say, to plan ahead, set up your identities and inform the users or any so-called the citizen developers what identities they use. So yeah, and absolutely, I think it's a great session, and I think in terms of there's probably a whole raft of other questions I could probably think of, but I'm like with everybody else, I'll probably come to you or look for you on the blog somewhere.
yeah, definitely.
But no, good. I think I'm just looking through the question. We haven't got any questions, so we'll probably just wrap up at that point, if I may. But just wanted to say, a big thanks to you, Garry, for giving up your time and really kind of just being with us here at M365 UK. And also my thanks to Patrick earlier on, and more importantly, you, the attendees, for giving up your time. And hopefully, you've taken quite a few things away today. I know I certainly have, and I still got some questions that I would like to research through. But yeah, I think I've posted the links in the Q&A window, so please feel free to submit any feedback you may have for the sessions today, because that really helps Garry and Patrick so that they can tailor in the future their sessions. And also, I'd love to hear from you, any of you out there who would love to present or even just tell a story, and I can help you with that, no matter how small or tiny you may have, but it will be really good to hear how you're making use of some of the Microsoft 365 tools and services and so forth. So there's the links over there. And next year, until we meet up, which is on the 13th of Jan. So we have all Microsoft teams from Vesku in Finland, and then we got Tomislav from Germany, who will be sharing their latest and the greatest and the best of Microsoft Teams, including Dataverse. So yeah, I think until then, just want to wish everybody happy holidays and wish you a happy new year, and stay safe. And until then, take care of yourselves. Thank you.